Now, last year, an investigation on Breakfast highlighted the problem of so-called silent phone calls. These often happen when telephone sales firms use an automatic dialing system. 50 homes may be called, but then only 20 salesmen are available to start talking. So guess what happens? If you're not one of the first to answer, there'll be no one there at the other end of the phone.
And of course, many people, especially the elderly, find these silent calls very disturbing, to say the least. Well, following our report, the regulator Ofcom has taken its first action to crack down on companies misusing the telephone system. In a moment, we'll be talking to a man who complained about this and an industry spokesman. But first, a reminder of how our reporter Graham Satchell exposed the problem.
Over the last month, Paul Costin has been plagued by a silent menace.
Hello? Hello?
It's not a crank caller, a heavy breather, or a would-be burglar.
We had more than 20 calls in a month.
It must have been pretty annoying.
It was very annoying, yes. Yeah.
And what did you end up thinking? I mean, when the phone rang, you must have thought, oh, God, here we go again.
Well, absolutely, yes, because you never know whether it's a relative or my son or my daughter. But when there's nobody there, of course, you're left wondering, well, just who is it that's making these calls?
Not a very nice feeling indeed, that. Well, following the report, Ofcom has named 2 firms which are the subject of complaints and imposed strict new guidelines on one of them. With us now, Robert Dierkowski of the Direct Marketing Association and David Hickston, one of the complainants who triggered the action. Let me come to you first, gentlemen. Thanks very much. David, you made the complaint. After what kind of treatment?
Initially, I had some of these calls. I complained. Nothing was done about it. Eventually, I worked out how we could get Ofcom to use their powers to actually do something about this. And that, in conjunction with your own efforts and efforts in the DMA, actually has now got something to happen.
What do you think about the measures? Do they go far enough?
I think in this case it's reasonable what has been done, but it's important we regard this as the starting point, proof that Ofcom have the powers, can use them, and can now help to get this problem solved once and for all.
It's interesting, when we've been asking our viewers about this problem, a lot of them have said that they have complained to BT, the operator, who has said it was powerless to do anything about them. Has that been your experience?
Well, don't forget, the Act, the Communications Act, actually only came into effect last July, so Ofcom took up its powers in December. That was shortly after you actually raised this issue on the programme. So it is only a short while that there has been regulation to penalise companies that do misuse communications networks in this way.
But why did it get to this situation in the first place? Isn't it better that these telemarketing companies keep their own houses in order? Presumably they must have the computer systems that enable them not to call people when there's no one to deal with the calls.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I'm quite pleased about, it raises the profile of the problem. We're able now to use this to make sure that companies across the country understand how they must behave, and that there are rules and regulations and they can be penalised. But most of all, of course, the adjudication says that you must behave in this way, and the way that they say is in strict accordance with the DMA code.
But of course they can just move it all offshore, can't they?
Well, I think that's very unlikely. I've gathered that Patricia Hewitt is on the programme today, and she's talking about how call centres are actually going to increase in size. So I think that's unlikely. But nonetheless, we have to make sure that companies understand they have an obligation, and this kind of nuisance shouldn't continue.
David, what's been your experience with these kind of silent calls? I mean, have they now stopped? Have you noticed it's got...
I still get these calls. I haven't taken my name off marketing lists. I don't mind getting marketing calls. What I do mind is people making nuisance calls to me, or indeed for that matter to anybody else.
But when you hear about these kind of regulations, penalties, financial penalties, which might actually balance out in terms of companies saying, well, we can pay the financial penalty because it's still cheaper than not having so many operators on our phones. Doesn't that worry you?
What is important is that the particular company involved here, the one that I complained about, the large company, has been put into a state of compliance by Ofcom. Ofcom will regulate what they do. I hope they'll publish what's happening so we know what's going on. And they will be forced to keep within the code, within reasonable bounds, as Ofcom determine. And that's the way to do it, keep them under control.
And Robert Dierkowski, even if it costs the telemarketing companies money, they're going to live with that, they're happy with that?
Absolutely. I mean, the whole business depends on companies behaving in an ethical way. We support Ofcom in its action, absolutely. And we're actually talking now to telecoms companies to ensure that there is a mechanism that doesn't breach data protection rules, whereby they can share information about companies which continue to breach the Act.
Okay.
Gentlemen, thank you both very much for coming in this morning. Thanks
Thank
for your
you.
time.
And if you want more information on dealing with those silent calls and find out how you can get your name removed from some of the mailing lists, go to our website. It's bbc.co.uk/breakfast. And look in today's information, you'll find all the details there.